A message from Jesus to your heart for healing the trauma that still echoes. There are moments in life when trauma becomes more than a memory. It becomes a presence, a shadow that follows you even into places that should feel safe. You survived something that changed you, but survival is not the same as healing. Your body moved forward in time, but part of your heart stayed behind in the moment where everything broke. The world around you kept going, yet a piece of you remained stuck with the echo of what happened. This message is for that part of you, the part you never show, the part you rarely talk about, the part Jesus sees with absolute clarity. Some trauma is loud and violent. Other trauma is silent and invisible, whispered through abandonment, rejection, betrayal, emotional neglect, or moments where you were forced to pretend you were fine just to survive. Trauma can be the absence of protection you needed. It can be the presence of something you never should have faced. It can be the moment someone else's choice left scars on your soul. It can be a season where pain became the air you breathed. You do not have to justify why it hurt. It hurt because you are human. What happened was real. It shaped the way you see yourself. It shaped the way you trust. It shaped the way you pray. It shaped the way you avoid things that feel dangerous even when you cannot explain why. This is what trauma does. It teaches the nervous system to prepare for danger even when there is none. It convinces the heart that the past is always waiting to repeat itself. It trains your mind to expect loss or betrayal before hope. It becomes a survival instinct long after the threat is gone. But Jesus is not intimidated by what broke you. He does not wait for you to heal before he comes close. He does not demand composure before offering comfort. He does not tell you to get over it. He sits with you in the place where it still hurts. He is the shepherd who finds the sheep while it is still trembling. He is the healer who enters the room where the pain began. He is the God who does not stand at a distance from what shattered you. He steps inside it. There are places in your heart that feel unsafe because the trauma left a message behind. Messages like you are not protected, you are alone, you should have been stronger, you should not feel this way, no one will understand. You will never be the same. These are not the voice of God. They are the voice of the wound. Trauma speaks like prophecy, but it is not telling the truth. It predicts a future based on the fear of the past. Jesus confronts that prophecy and replaces it with his own. If you listen closely, there is another voice. A voice that does not rush you or shame you. A voice that does not shout, demands, but whispers restoration. A voice that does not rewrite what happened, but rewrites what it means. A voice that does not say, "Get up," and pretend, but says, "I am here," and you are allowed to breathe again. Healing begins there. Not in pretending, not in ignoring, in letting Jesus speak where trauma has been speaking for too long. This message is not about erasing what happened. It is about breaking its authority. It is about reclaiming what the echo tried to own. It is about letting Jesus touch the place that still trembles. It is about letting him stand where your strength collapsed. He is here not to rush you, but to restore you. He is here not to demand perfection, but to remind you of a truth trauma tried to bury. You are not what happened to you. You are who he is healing you to become. Trauma is not just the moment something happened. Trauma is the echo it leaves behind. The echo in the body that tenses for danger, even in safe places. The echo in the mind that replays memories you never asked to remember. The echo in the heart that still braces for a kind of pain you pray never comes again. You survived what happened, but the echo stayed. It speaks when you are quiet. It appears when you try to rest. It interrupts moments of peace with whispers of the past. The world often misunderstands trauma. It tells you to get over it, to let it go, to move on, as if healing were a decision instead of a process. As if the body did not store memory, as if the nervous system did not learn to scan for danger, as if fear was simply a lack of faith. No one sees how much energy it takes to appear normal. No one sees how loud the echo is in the silence. No one sees the emotional work happening inside you just to make it through the day. There is a moment trauma creates, a moment frozen in the soul. The moment the heart says, I am not safe. The moment the mind says, I am alone. The moment the body says, remember this, because we can never let it happen again. That is the moment the echo begins. It follows you into adulthood, into relationships, into prayer. Even in places where God is present, the echo tries to convince you that protection will fail again. Trauma always speaks in the language of fear. But Jesus hears the echo too. He does not shame you for it. He does not tell you to pretend it is gone. He doesn't demand silence from a wound that has never been treated. He acknowledges what you went through, not to validate the pain as your identity, but to break the lie that it owns you. When he steps toward the wound, he is not approaching something that scares him. He is approaching something he came to heal. The echo of trauma teaches you to anticipate harm. Healing teaches you to anticipate God. The echo trains you to distrust love. Healing teaches you to recognize safety. The echo tells you the world is dangerous and you are unprotected. Healing teaches you that Jesus goes where you could not go and stands where you could not stand. He is not afraid of the room in your heart where fear still lives. Healing does not start with forgetting. Healing starts with recognition. Naming what hurt you does not give it power. It takes power back. You are not weak for feeling the effects of what happened. You are human. You are not broken beyond repair. You are wounded in a place Jesus is ready to touch. The echo may sound like truth, but it is not the final voice in your story. You are not failing because the trauma still echoes. You are still healing. You have not gone backward because the memory resurfaced. You encountered the place where Jesus wants to work. Every time the echo speaks, it reveals where the healer needs to enter, not as an intruder, as the one who was with you, even in the moment you felt most alone. There is a day coming when the echo will not command you anymore, when it will speak but you will not respond, when it will call but you will not follow, when memory will not mean captivity, when what once triggered fear will become evidence of survival. The echo may be loud now, but Jesus is here, and his voice has authority the memory does not. Trauma convinces you that healing can only happen in the present, but the pain that controls you did not begin here. It began in a moment, a room, a sentence, a face, a silence, a night when something happened or something didn't happen and the world became unsafe. The body remembered what the mind tried to forget. And somewhere deep inside, a younger version of you stayed behind, waiting for someone to come back for them. This is why Jesus does not just enter your present, he steps into the memory. He does not wait for you on the other side of your pain. He walks back into it and takes you by the hand. Many believers think Jesus only meets them in prayer, worship, or the future they are trying to reach. But the truth is more intimate. He meets you where the wound was formed. He enters the hallway where the shouting happened. He steps into the room where the door closed. He sits beside the version of you who froze because there was no strength left to fight. He stands in front of the scene that marked you and refuses to let it prophesy over the rest of your life. He's not waiting in a church building for you to be composed. He's standing inside the memory where you lost your breath. This is why trauma feels sacred in the wrong way, because the enemy tries to build a temple around the moment of impact, a spiritual monument that says worship the fear, obey the memory, believe what the wound said. Jesus enters that false sanctuary and tears it down, not to erase what happened, but to evict the lie that it owns you. He confronts the moment the enemy tried to rewrite your story. He does not watch from a distance. He intervenes. When Jesus enters a memory, the atmosphere changes. The shame that lived there begins to suffocate. The fear that claimed ownership loses its authority. The loneliness that shaped your identity is exposed as a lie. He does not tell you to go back and be stronger. He goes back with you. He stands where you could not stand. He speaks where you were silenced. He covers what was exposed. He restores what was taken. He holds the version of you who could not hold themselves. Some Christians think healing means pretending the trauma was small. Jesus does the opposite. He acknowledges the weight of it. He affirms the reality of the wound. Healing begins when the truth is allowed to speak. Jesus is not afraid to say it was wrong, it was unfair, it should not have happened, you should have been protected. That moment was not your fault. He untangles the memory from the lie that you deserved it. He breaks the connection between the wound and your identity. Jesus does not travel through time, but he heals the parts of you that stayed trapped there. He finds the 5-year-old, the 13-year-old, the 28-year-old, the version of you who shut down emotionally because there was no other way to survive. He sits with them, and he waits until your heart realizes it is safe enough to come out of the hiding place. He does not pull you out violently. He waits for willingness. He waits for surrender. He waits for the moment you say, "I am ready for you to see all of it." This is the kind of healing that feels like time travel. You feel something loosen in your chest, something unhook from your ribs, something you carried without language finally finds rest. You realize you are not alone in the room where your story broke. Jesus was there then. Jesus is there now. Jesus will be there when the memory surfaces again, not to judge, to heal. He enters the memory not to erase the past, but to redeem it. Not to deny what happened, but to deny it the right to define you. Where trauma took something from you, Jesus restores. Where fear claimed territory, Jesus reclaims it. Where the echo spoke the loudest, Jesus speaks louder. Every trauma leaves a message behind. Sometimes the moment ends, but the message lives on. It attaches itself to identity like a stain the soul cannot wash out. Long after the pain stops physically, the lie continues spiritually. And the lie is what Jesus came to confront. The wound hurt you, but it was the lie that tried to redefine you. The moment broke something, but the lie tried to own you. Trauma does not just wound, trauma teaches. It teaches the wrong lesson about who you are, who God is, and what you can expect from the world around you. Trauma teaches you to believe things God never said. It teaches you that you are alone because no one came when you needed them. It teaches you that you are unsafe because someone abused the trust you gave. It teaches you that something is wrong with you because pain has followed you like a shadow you cannot outrun. It teaches you that you are unworthy of protection because protection did not show up when you cried out for it. Trauma becomes a false prophet. It predicts your future based on the fear of your past. It whispers that good things do not last, that love leaves, that God is distant, that you must survive alone. Jesus does not argue with the pain, but he confronts the lie. He speaks to the belief beneath the memory. He reveals that trauma taught you a fear-based theology, a worldview built on abandonment instead of presence, harm instead of protection, isolation instead of love. He comes to untangle truth from emotion, not to invalidate how you feel, but to break what those feelings tried to make permanent. This is the confrontation every wounded heart must face. The lie cannot remain the narrator of your story. Trauma said, "You are alone." Jesus says, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Trauma said you were unprotected. Jesus says, "I am your refuge and fortress." Trauma said you are too damaged to be healed. Jesus says, "I bind up the brokenhearted." Trauma said your value was lost in what happened. Jesus says you are worth dying for. You may not feel those truths yet. That does not make them less true. Feelings are not the foundation of healing. Truth is. Healing begins when truth becomes louder than memory. Not instantly, not forcefully, but steadily, like light entering a room that has been dark for too long. Jesus does not rush the process. He sits with you until the lie loosens its grip. He repeats his words until the echo loses authority. He does not shame you for believing the lie. He simply refuses to leave you inside it. Think of the lies trauma taught you as chains and the truth Jesus speaks as keys. A chain is not broken by ignoring it. A chain is broken by replacing what held it together. That is what truth does. It does not pretend the trauma never happened. It removes the trauma's right to dictate your identity. If the enemy used trauma to build a stronghold in your mind, Jesus uses truth to tear it down brick by brick. There will be moments when the lie feels more familiar than the truth, when fear feels safer than hope, when believing the worst feels easier than trusting God for something better. That does not mean you are failing. It means you are unlearning survival patterns and learning how to live again. There is a difference between being triggered by the past and being defined by it. Jesus is guiding you out of definition and into freedom. The lie trauma taught you is not your identity. The truth Jesus speaks is. The lie speaks from pain. The truth speaks from the cross. The lie predicts doom. The truth promises redemption. The lie echoes. The truth answers. The lie accuses. The truth restores. One will keep you in the moment that broke you. The other will lead you into the life that is waiting for you. Healing begins with a choice. Which voice will you believe next? Trauma is not just an event. It becomes an agreement, a silent contract between your wound and your identity. It forms in moments you barely noticed, in sentences you never said out loud. It sounds like, I will never trust again. I will never be safe again. I will never be loved without condition. I will never be enough. Sometimes the agreement is not a sentence. Sometimes it is a posture, a flinch, a wall, a decision to feel nothing so nothing can hurt. These agreements are not protection. They are prisons. An emotional agreement with the past is when your soul says yes to something God never said. Trauma tells you that the world is dangerous. You agree. Trauma tells you that love leaves. You agree. Trauma tells you that intimacy is unsafe. You agree. Trauma tells you that vulnerability is a threat. You agree. Without realizing it, the wound becomes the teacher and the lesson becomes law. But Jesus did not endure the cross for you to live under laws fear created. The enemy reinforces these agreements not by shouting lies, but by whispering confirmation. Something goes wrong in your life and he says, see, this is why you cannot trust. Someone disappoints you and he says, see, this is why you should stay distant. You feel anxious and he says, see, you are broken beyond repair. A reaction becomes a belief. A belief becomes identity, and identity becomes prison bars. But there is something trauma did not expect. Jesus interrupts agreements. He steps into the conversations you never said out loud. He speaks into beliefs you never questioned because they felt like survival. He puts his hand on the internal vow that kept you alive in the moment of crisis, but is killing you slowly now. He does not shame you for making the agreement. He understands why you did, but he will not let you stay bound to it. Breaking emotional agreements is not pretending you were never hurt. It is telling the past it does not have the right to own your future. It is saying out loud, I will not build a life around what wounded me. I will not shape my identity around survival. I will not worship the echo of fear. Jesus is not asking you to deny what happened. He is asking you to deny it authority. This is where healing becomes spiritual. This is where you speak to the invisible, where you confront the internal structures trauma built, where you say, I release myself from the vow that I must always be strong. I release myself from the belief that I am unworthy of love. I release myself from the expectation of abandonment. I release myself from the agreement that fear is my protector. Every agreement that once kept you alive must bow to the one who gives life. When emotional agreements break, the nervous system begins to learn a new language. Trust no longer feels like danger. Rest no longer feels suspicious. Peace no longer feels like a trap. Safety no longer feels like a lie. Hope no longer feels impossible. You stop looking for warning signs and start looking for Jesus. You stop negotiating with trauma for permission to live and start agreeing with God for the right to heal. Healing does not ask you to forget the past. Healing asks you to stop partnering with it. You cannot change what happened, but you can break the contract it tried to make with your identity. When Jesus says you are free, he is not offering an idea. He is offering a reality. Freedom is not a theory. Freedom is a decision. Freedom is the moment the voice of the past loses its vote. Freedom is when the echo speaks and you do not answer. Trauma wrote a script. You do not have to perform it. Jesus is rewriting your future. One agreement at a time. There comes a moment after trauma when the wound stops being a memory and becomes a voice. It speaks without permission. It comments on your decisions. It interrupts your peace. It pretends to be logic, but it is fear. It pretends to be wisdom, but it is self-protection. It pretends to be discernment, but it is survival instinct wearing spiritual clothing. The wound becomes the narrator of your inner world, and you start to live as if it were telling the truth. This voice does not always sound dramatic. Sometimes it sounds like caution. Do not trust them. Do not speak up. Do not hope. Sometimes it sounds like self-criticism. I ruin everything. I'm too damaged. I am too much. Sometimes it sounds like prophecy. It will happen again. Love will leave. Safety will fail. If something feels peaceful, it cannot last. This voice predicts disaster, like a memory trying to protect you from being blindsided again. But what protected you then is imprisoning you now. The wound teaches you to scan every room for danger, to analyze every tone, every delay in response, every silence as a threat. You start to prepare for abandonment before connection begins. You prepare for betrayal before trust has a chance to grow. The wound becomes the storyteller, and the story is always the same. You are not safe. You are not chosen. You are not held. The worst moments in your past try to become the definition of your future. Jesus does not silence the voice by force. He silences it by presence. He stands in the same place the voice once ruled and speaks truth with an authority trauma cannot imitate. His voice does not come to argue with the wound. His voice comes to overrule it. Where the wound says you are alone, Jesus says, I am here. Where the wound says you are unworthy, Jesus says, I have called you by name. Where the wound says the worst will come, Jesus says, I am your future. Where the wound uses fear to control you, Jesus uses love to free you. This is what happens when the voice of the wound meets the voice of the shepherd. Fear speaks of threat. Jesus speaks of guidance. The wound speaks of loss. Jesus speaks of restoration. The wound speaks of identity in what happened. Jesus speaks of identity in who he is. Once his voice enters the room, the wound is no longer the only narrator. The trauma is no longer the only interpreter of reality. The echo is no longer the only prophecy over your life. Healing does not mean the voice disappears overnight. At first, the voice of Jesus and the voice of the wound may speak at the same time. One feels familiar. One feels new. One feels like protection. One feels like risk. One feels like the only world you know. One feels like the doorway to the world you were created for. Healing begins by choosing who you respond to. Not who you hear, but who you believe. There will be moments when the wound speaks louder. Not because it has power, but because it has history. There will be days when you slip back into old thoughts. That is not failure. That is evidence that healing is happening and the wound is protesting its eviction. Every time you choose Jesus' voice over the voice of the wound, the volume of trauma decreases. One decision at a time, one moment of trust at a time, one breath of courage at a time. The wound became a voice to protect you. Jesus becomes a voice to free you. One wants to keep you alive. The other wants to help you live. You survived the moment that broke you. Now Jesus is teaching you to survive the echo. The wound may speak, but it does not get the last word. One of the deepest wounds trauma creates is not the moment of impact, but the moment after. The silence, the absence, the realization that the people you needed most did not show up. The phone call that never came, the apology that was never offered, the arms that should have held you but didn't, the look in someone's eyes that said, "You're on your own now." This is where abandonment becomes more painful than the trauma itself. Because what happened hurt you, but who wasn't there convinced you that you were not worth staying for. This is the lie abandonment tries to teach. If people left during the worst moment of your life, God might leave too. If others walked away when you needed them, maybe Jesus will get tired of you eventually. If the people who should have protected you did not, maybe you were meant to live without protection. These beliefs don't speak in full sentences. They speak in feelings. They speak in hesitation. They speak in the part of you that expects to lose even what is good. Jesus confronts that belief not with arguments, but with presence. He is the God who stays. He stays through the memory. He stays through the shaking. He stays through the numbness. He stays through the moments where you cannot feel him and the moments where you can barely feel yourself. He stays when your faith collapses under the weight of what happened. He stays when panic grips the chest like a hand. He stays when the fight, flight, or freeze response hijacks your body without warning. He stays when you feel too broken to pray. He stays when all you can offer him is silence. Jesus does not leave when the room in your heart still looks like the moment of impact. He does not leave when trust feels impossible. He does not leave when anger surfaces. He does not leave when questions rise like smoke. He does not leave when you ask, "Why didn't you stop it?" He does not call your confusion rebellion. He calls it honesty. He does not demand that you feel safe before he proves he is safe. He is safe first. The presence of Jesus does not erase the memory, but it drives out the isolation that memory used to carry. When he steps into the place where abandonment shaped your identity, something shifts. The room is no longer empty. The silence is no longer evidence that you were forgotten. The memory of being alone is interrupted by the reality that he was there when no one else was. It may take time for your heart to believe it, but truth does not depend on your readiness to feel it. There are people who left because they did not know how to stay. There are people who left because they could not face their own failures. There are people who left because they were not capable of carrying what you needed. Jesus does not leave because he is capable in every place people were not. He carries what they dropped. He repairs what they damaged. He protects what they exposed. He holds what they abandoned. If you let him, Jesus will stand in the doorway of the memory like a guard, not letting fear cross the threshold the same way again. He will teach your heart that presence is possible after abandonment, that safety can exist after danger, that trust can be rebuilt brick by brick, that tears are not weakness, that healing is not disloyalty to who you were, that staying is not something God does temporarily. It is who he is. What happened to you was not proof that God left. It was proof the world breaks. Jesus staying is proof that grace restores. He stayed on the cross. He stayed in death until every chain was broken. He stayed through the resurrection. He stays now, not hovering above your pain like a distant observer, but sitting beside you in the places where abandonment tried to convince you that you are unlovable. You are not too damaged for him to stay. You are the reason he came. Healing is often misunderstood. People imagine it like a switch flipping or a sunrise that suddenly fills the room with light. But real healing, the kind Jesus does in the places trauma once ruled, rarely starts with comfort. It starts with discomfort. It starts with the places that ache when touched. It starts with the questions you never wanted to ask. Healing doesn't begin when the pain disappears. Healing begins when the pain stops being hidden. There is a moment in healing when it feels like getting worse instead of better, when old memories surface, when tears come without warning, when triggers happen in places that never triggered you before, when numbness begins to melt and feelings return like a flood you do not feel ready for. This is not regression. This is resurrection. Numbness was a survival mechanism. Feeling again is evidence you are coming back to life. When Jesus begins to heal trauma, he often brings to the surface what you buried to survive. Not to shame you, not to overwhelm you, but because what remains buried cannot be healed. He exposes the wound to remove the infection, not to condemn the injured. The spiritual surgery feels painful not because Jesus is harming you, but because he is touching what harmed you. Pain in healing is not the same as pain in trauma. Trauma breaks. Healing rebuilds. There are days when healing feels like grief. You grieve the version of yourself that never got to feel safe. You grieve opportunities the trauma stole. You grieve the innocence that dissolved the moment trust was shattered. Grief is not weakness. Grief is the heart processing what the mind survived. Jesus does not rush you through grief. He sits in it with you until it releases its grip. Sometimes healing demands forgiveness, not as an excuse for what happened, but as a release from what still holds you. Sometimes it demands boundaries, because protecting your restoration is not selfishness. It is stewardship. Sometimes it demands rest, because exhaustion is not a sign that you have failed, but a sign that you have carried more than anyone ever should have. Jesus is not asking you to heal in a single leap. He is asking you to heal step by step. Healing hurts before it helps, because the wound has to open before the poison can leave. Healing hurts before it helps, because numbness has to thaw before feeling can return. Healing hurts before it helps, because trust has to be rebuilt, not imagined. Healing hurts before it helps, because the body learned to brace for danger, and safety feels foreign at first. Healing hurts before it helps, because you have lived in survival mode so long that peace feels suspicious. But Jesus does not lead you into pain without purpose. He leads you through it. He does not open a wound he will not heal. He does not reveal what he will not redeem. He does not ask you to revisit the place of trauma unless he intends to rewrite the story. He is the shepherd who walks you through the valley, not around it, through it, because the only way out is forward. If your healing hurts, do not assume you are failing. Assume something sacred is happening beneath the surface. The shaking does not mean it is falling apart. It means what was built on fear is collapsing, so something built on truth can stand. If you feel like the pain has gotten louder, it may be because Jesus is closer. If you feel like the echoes are stirring, it may be because the walls are coming down. Healing hurts before it helps. But it helps. You will not always feel like this. The tears will not always fall this easily. The fear will not always rise this quickly. The memories will not always intrude this sharply. The voice of the wound will not always speak this loudly. This is not the end. This is the part of the story where the healer has his hands on what once controlled you. The hurt is proof of contact. The contact is proof of healing. And the healing is proof that Jesus is not done. There is a belief many wounded hearts carry: if I remember it, I'm not healed. But that is not true. Healing does not mean forgetting. Healing means the memory no longer owns you. Healing means the moment no longer defines you. Healing means the wound no longer speaks louder than Jesus. Forgetting would erase part of your story. Freedom redeems it. Some experiences are too significant to forget. They shaped your nervous system. They altered the way you breathe. They changed how you look at doors, voices, closeness, silence. Trauma leaves impressions, not just memories. It affects reflexes before thoughts. It changes reactions before beliefs. Healing does not erase this automatically. It transforms what these impressions mean. What once signified danger becomes a signal that Jesus is near. What once triggered panic becomes a reminder of what you survived. The memory remains, but the power shifts. Freedom without forgetting is when you remember the moment, but you don't return to it emotionally. You can say, yes, that happened, but no, it does not control me. Yes, I was wounded, but no, I am not defined by that wound. Yes, the memory echoes, but no, the echo is not the voice I follow anymore. This is what grace does. It separates identity from experience. It separates who you are from what you endured. It separates the memory from its authority. Jesus does not ask you to erase the story. He asks to rewrite its ending. The enemy wanted the memory to be a monument to despair. Jesus turns it into a testimony of survival. The enemy wanted it to be a prophecy of destruction. Jesus turns it into evidence that resurrection is real. The enemy wanted it to be the moment you never outgrew. Jesus makes it the moment he enters, so it can no longer imprison you. Some believers fear that remembering means reopening the wound, but a healed scar does not bleed when touched. It only proves that something closed. It proves that something hurt deeply, but it also proves that something healed faithfully. Scars are not failures. Scars are evidence that God touched what broke. Scars are proof that you lived through the thing that could have ended you. There is no shame in having scars. Heaven calls them testimonies. Freedom without forgetting also means you stop negotiating with the past. You stop trying to earn closure. You stop demanding answers before you allow healing. You stop replaying versions of the story to punish yourself. You stop waiting for someone else to come back and fix what they broke. You stop hoping time alone will do what only Jesus can do. Closure is not when the person apologizes. Closure is when Jesus speaks. There will be days when the memory resurfaces. That does not mean you are back at the beginning. It means Jesus is showing you the next layer he wants to heal. Healing is not a straight line. It is a spiral. You pass the same places again, but with a different strength. What once shattered you now shakes you, but he grounds you before you fall. What once felt suffocating now feels survivable. That is progress. That is deliverance in motion. Freedom without forgetting means you can revisit the memory without reliving the fear. You can acknowledge the story without losing yourself inside it. You can say it out loud without falling apart. You can stand in the place where you once collapsed. You can see who you were and bless them for surviving. You can see who you are now and know Jesus stayed long enough for the future to open again. The memory may remain, but the chains are gone. The echo may speak, but it does not command. The wound may whisper, but it does not lead. Freedom is not the absence of memory. Freedom is the presence of Jesus inside it. There is a moment in every healing journey where you must separate identity from experience. What happened to you was real. It mattered. It shaped you, but it is not you. Trauma tried to weld itself to your identity, to convince you that your story and your wound are the same thing. It tried to rename you. It tried to define you by the moment that broke you. It tried to convince you that the trauma is the most important truth about your life. Jesus disagrees. The world may call you what happened: survivor, victim, broken, damaged, too much, too sensitive, too guarded, too complicated, too emotional. These labels feel like they explain you, but they do not describe you. They describe what you endured. They describe what you fought through. They describe what you survived. They describe the pain that tried to bury you, but they are not who you are. They are evidence of what you lived through, not proof of who you will be forever. Jesus never names someone by their wound. He does not call the bleeding woman unclean. He calls her daughter. He does not call Peter by his denial. He calls him Rock. He does not call Thomas by his doubt. He calls him to believe. He does not call Mary by her grief. He calls her by name in a garden. He does not call the demonized man by the spirits that tormented him. He calls him clothed and in his right mind. Jesus separates identity from history. He separates person from pain. He separates the heart from what tried to destroy it. Trauma wants to be a mirror, reflecting back a distorted image of who you are. Jesus shatters the mirror and hands you a new reflection. The reflection is not of who you were in the moment of impact. It is who you are in the hands of a Redeemer. Loved, seen, known, carried, covered, held, chosen, safe. Not because the trauma was small, but because his healing is greater. When Jesus says you are not what happened to you, he is not ignoring the story. He is reclaiming it. He is saying the worst thing that happened is not the truest thing about you. He is saying the moment that wounded you is not the moment that defines you. He is saying the event that broke your sense of safety is not the end of the narrative. He is saying the identity trauma tried to assign you is not the identity heaven wrote for you. This truth may feel distant at first. Your nervous system may still react to shadows that look like the past. Your body may still brace for impact when there is no threat. Your heart may still tremble at the idea of trust. That does not mean Jesus is wrong. It means healing is still unfolding. Identity is not always felt before it is believed. You agree with Jesus first. Your emotions catch up over time. This is where faith becomes deeply personal. Faith is not just believing God can heal, it is believing he can heal you. Faith is not just believing God forgives, it is believing he forgives you. Faith is not just believing God gives identity, it is believing you can wear it without shame. The enemy wants you to worship your trauma as the most defining force in your life. Jesus wants you to worship the one who walks you out of it. You are not too late to heal. You are not too broken to be restored. You are not too complicated to be understood. You are not too damaged to be loved. What happened to you is part of your story, but it is not the author of your destiny. Jesus is, and he finishes what he starts. You are not what happened to you. You are what Jesus is healing you to become. You are the chapter the enemy never planned for. You are the testimony that trauma did not get the final word. You are living proof that survival was never the end of the story. Healing is. There is a silence inside you that trauma filled with fear, a silence that once felt like loneliness, a silence that felt like waiting for something bad to happen again, the silence before the shouting, the silence before the door slammed, the silence before the world changed. Trauma turned stillness into a threat, but Jesus is reclaiming that silence. He is turning the place where fear lived into the place where his voice can finally be heard. Be still, not as a command to perform calmness, but as a permission to stop running. You do not have to outrun what happened. You do not have to earn your right to heal. You do not have to deserve safety before you can rest in it. Be still is not Jesus telling you to suppress your emotions. It is Jesus telling your fear that it does not have authority here anymore. It is Jesus placing his hand on the wound and saying, you are safe enough to breathe now. There is a message Jesus speaks that reaches deeper than the memory. You are not alone. You never were. The trauma convinced you that God abandoned you. But abandonment was an experience, not a truth. The truth is presence. The truth is Emmanuel, God with us. The truth is that when the moment broke you, Jesus stood inside the pieces. When you froze in fear, he stayed. When you lost your sense of self, he remembered who you were. When you learned to expect danger, he covered you even when you could not feel it. Be still. Let the weight that sits on your chest come into the light. Let the fear that wakes you at night be named. Let the questions rise without punishing yourself for having them. Jesus is not afraid of your questions. He's not intimidated by your triggers. He does not walk away when the old emotions return. He does not shame you for shaking. His presence is not conditional on your stability. His love is not dependent on how healed you are. He is here now, not waiting for a cleaner version of you. This is not a call to forget the past. It is a call to stop living in it. You do not heal by pretending. You heal by belonging. You heal by being held. You heal by letting Jesus touch the memory where the echo began. He is not asking you to relive the pain. He is asking you to release its authority. He is not asking you to solve the trauma. He is asking you to surrender it, not into emptiness, into his hands. Be still. That is where you learn to hear the voice that was drowned out by fear, the voice that does not accuse, the voice that does not rush, the voice that calls you beloved, the voice that says you are not a burden. The voice that says healing is not a threat. The voice that says the echo has lied long enough. The voice that says, I am here. I stayed. I am not leaving. This is the moment where the story shifts. Not when the memory disappears, but when the memory loses command. Not when the fear is gone, but when fear is no longer worshipped. Not when you stop shaking, but when you realize Jesus is not shaking with you. He is steady, and his steadiness is enough for both of you. Be still. Jesus is speaking now, not to the version of you that pretends everything is fine. He is speaking to the version of you who hid to survive. He is speaking to the version of you who learned silence as a shield. He is speaking to the version of you who still hears the echo. He is speaking to the wounded, not the polished, to the trembling, not the triumphant, to the real you. You are not what happened. You are what is being healed. You are not the echo. You are the testimony Jesus is writing. Jesus, I bring before you the places in my soul that time could not heal, the rooms where the echoes still live, the memories that return without invitation, the fear that rises even when the world around me is quiet. I bring you the version of myself that learned to survive by staying silent. I bring the part of me that flinches at love, that braces for abandonment, that expects pain before hope. I bring the wound that became a voice. I bring the echo that became identity, and I lay it all in your hands. I do not stand before you pretending I'm stronger than I am. I do not hide the shaking in my chest or the heaviness behind my eyes. I come to you as I am, not as I wish I were. You are not asking me to be healed before I come. You are asking me to come so you can heal me, so I open the door to the places I feared you would not want to see. I surrender the rooms I have guarded for years. Let your presence enter where trauma took residence. Jesus, speak into the memory where the echo began. Stand in the moment my heart broke and declare a new beginning. Confront the lie trauma taught me. Break the agreements my soul made in fear. Unravel the beliefs that have kept me captive. Cancel the identity that formed around survival. Remove the label the wound tried to give me. I do not belong to the moment that hurt me. I belong to the one who healed me. Let your truth speak louder than the memory. I release the need to be my own protector. I release the fear that tells me trust is dangerous. I release the expectation of abandonment. I release the reflex to run when love comes close. I release the vow that I must always be strong. I release the belief that I am too damaged to be restored. Jesus, where these lies once ruled, let your truth reign. Where fear once dictated my decisions, let your peace lead me. Where trauma built walls, let your love build a home. Heal the body that remembers what the mind forgot. Heal the nervous system that learned to expect danger. Heal the heart that still tightens at the thought of being vulnerable. Heal the places in me that shut down to survive. Teach my soul that safety exists here. Teach my heart that trust can grow again. Teach my mind that the future is not the past waiting to repeat itself. Teach my body that rest is not a threat. Jesus, I consecrate my story to you, not the polished version, but the true one, the broken chapters, the unanswered questions, the silent nights, the trembling prayers, the moments I thought you were gone. I place them in your hands. Rewrite what needs to be rewritten. Restore what needs to be rebuilt. Redeem what tried to destroy me. Turn the echo into a testimony. Turn the memory into evidence of mercy. Turn the wound into a doorway for your glory. Where trauma once said I am alone, your presence says I am held. Where fear once said I am unsafe, your promise says I am covered. Where shame once said I am unworthy, your blood says I am beloved. Where abandonment once said no one stayed, your voice says I never left. Jesus, I give you the echoes, I give you the memories, I give you the fear, I give you the shaking, I give you the sorrow, and I receive what you offer in return: peace, safety, identity, presence, redemption, healing, not in theory but in reality. Not in imagination, but in experience. Not someday, but here. Not when I feel ready, but now. My healing is not proof of my strength. It is proof of your nearness, and I believe you are near. Amen.